Hi class, today we're going to be doing our audience profile and looking at how do we analyze our audience so we can better tailor our argument. Oftentimes students will tell me that everyone is their audience. They're anybody that happens to pick up their argument and read it, that's who they're targeting. Think about what the problem would be if everyone was your audience. And we'll get back to that question in 1 minute. I want to just offer you an example. So imagine that you need $1,000. Maybe your car is broken down and you need to get it fixed. And the two people that you would probably ask for this money are your best friend and your mother. If you went to go talk to your mother and asked her for the $1,000, would you say things differently than if you went and talked to your best friend and asked her for the $1,000? Probably, right? With mom, you might say, hey mom, I'll help you out around the house more. I'll take little brother and little sister, to and from school because I'll have the car now. You'll have all kinds of examples and ways to persuade your mom that you wouldn't even try to say with your best friend. With your best friend, you'd be like, man, I always took you out, paid for this, did that, and I'll got your meals for the rest of the year or something like that, or I'll get you back, I'll pay you back in 3 months, or you'll find a different way to persuade your best friend. So going back to the questions that I have, why would having everyone be your audience be a problem? If you had your mom and your best friend in a room together, and then you looked at both of them and said, hey, I need $1,000. Which one of you would be willing to give it to me? I need it because I need a car. And what ends up happening is when you're trying to talk to everyone, you only think about you and what you think is convincing and what would convince you. Problem is your audience isn't you. So it's very important for you to start thinking about who do I want to target? And again, it's your choice. It's not something that happens to you. Your audience doesn't choose you. You choose your audience. Think about politicians like Barack Obama or other politicians. And when they make speeches, while it might be sounding like they're talking to the general American population, oftentimes there's a sect and a specific target audience for whatever issue it is that they're addressing at that time. Well, today we're going to go into the details of how to analyze your audience. Here are a few things that can help you become more persuasive and effective. You'll be able to gain valuable insight about your readers, and this can help you choose and develop relevant and meaningful argument. So you can think of things that are meaningful towards your audience, not necessarily you. And then you can create a writing plan that will effectively target this audience. Think back to mom versus best friend. What tone, style, language, word choice, content, all that kind of stuff would you have with mom versus best friend? They're going to be different. So there are 3 main areas that we will be looking at. The knowledge of the actual topic that we're writing about, the disposition of the audience, and finally their demographics. So with the knowledge analysis, these are the questions that we want to ask. And we don't have to ask all of them, but these questions kind of help us kind of understand our audience. Again, you're deciding. So first of all, how much does my audience already know about my topic? This is your decision. Do you want to target an audience that is pretty unaware about mental issues and mental health and illnesses and they don't have much other than pop and media influences? Or are you going to imagine that your audience are a bunch of psychologists that are trained in mental health issues or somewhere in between all that? So you have to kind of think where it is. Why is that important? Well, when you're writing your paper, are you going to give us a ton of background information? Are you going to inform your audience a lot? That's usually with audiences that know very little. Or are you going to assume my audience already knows this stuff? I don't need to, I'm just going to start right in and at this point. And that's your decision which one you would like to do. Then get more into specifics, like what do they specifically already know? What don't they know? What are some new things that I can inform them about? How are they going to benefit from the information? You always want to think about your audience and like, why should they care? Why is this important to them specifically? You kind of want to really get to understand who your audience is. Think about ways that they can use the information, and then try to anticipate questions that they'll have about information. And of course, you want to always think about, am I talking over their heads? Is it too complex? Or am I insulting their intelligence? Did I dumb it down too much? So those are all things that you want to consider. Again, you're picking, you're deciding where your audience's knowledge level is at. From there, you're going to look at their disposition. So you're going to look at their emotions, their feelings, how their mood is, their attitude towards the topic. You might want to ask yourself, what are they going to expect when they see this document and they read like the first paragraph, the intro to it? What expectations are they going to have? What are some things that they're going to want explained? What are some things that they're going to want solutions to? What are some counter perspectives that they're going to want addressed? What are their concerns? What problems do they have about the topic? What interests might they have, or goals? Maybe you might want to have an audience that all have, mental health issues or know someone that does. Maybe that's your audience. So then what is their motivation? What are their needs that need to be met? And of course, then are there any like biases or preconceived ideas that the readers are going to have about you and your knowledge level, right? And who you are, and whether or not you're like, what do you know? You're not a psychologist and you don't have a mental health issue. Why should we listen to you? You want to kind of think about those preconceived notions that your readers might have. And then any kind of attitudes also. And anticipate those so you can quell those fears. So you could say things like, while I don't have a degree in psychology, have a big interest in it, I research it, I'm a college student right now, I've written several papers. So you can kind of talk about how you have knowledge and you have expertise, or you can give them a personal story about yourself or someone you know. Things like that really help quell an audience that maybe is in that boat and wants to know that you relate to it. So you want to kind of think about your audience disposition. Again, you choose where you think they fall in these areas. And then finally, our demographics. So you kind of want to think about, do I want to target an audience that is homogeneous, which means they're all alike? So for instance, I only want to target females, or I only want to target low-income people, so you got to think about in that terms homogeneous. Or do I want a variety sampling as far as my audience goes, that there's going to be things that, like for instance, race won't be an issue for you. It might be just an example. You might say I'll target all races, and so therefore it's heterogeneous. I recommend that you do some homogeneous and some heterogeneous, so that you have a little bit of a variety, but you're not trying to basically persuade everyone. So the first thing you'll look at here is, what is the age of my readers? So again, you could make it heterogeneous and say all ages. I don't care about age. Or you can make it homogeneous and say, I only want to talk to teenagers. I only want to talk to middle-aged people. I only want to talk to elderly, whatever. Okay? Socioeconomic status, how would you describe them? So are they, lower class, middle class, upper class, or again, heterogeneous? It doesn't matter what class, all classes. Again, if you start saying heterogeneous to each of these categories, eventually you're targeting everyone. So at some point, you do have to pick some homogeneous. So, and some things you can think about with socioeconomic status is like, let's say you want to target people who are psychologists, or you want to target people who are doctors, or maybe you want to, so there might be a specific occupation that you want to look at and kind of talk about and make that your audience, and who you're trying to convince of the point that you're trying to make. Then you can go on and kind of look at their political affiliations. Like, do you want to talk to people who are more liberal? Do you want to talk to people who are more conservative? Do you want to talk to people who are, really out there, Green Party, Libertarian, something else? Do you not care? Again, is it heterogeneous? So, and that could be an interesting thing. It depends on what you're trying to argue. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're arguing politics, but if you're asking for educational system to have a psychologist on every campus and do mental health screening as often as we do hearing and eye tests, conservatives are going to be against that because it's costly, and liberals are going to be for that. So in that way, in that regard, you will be choosing a political party probably. That's something to think about. Religious affiliations are important to think about, because if you want to talk about spiritual aspects of stuff, thinking about what what you want your audience to be. So maybe you want to specifically talk to people who are spiritual minded, or maybe you want to talk to people who aren't. There's going to be different kinds of language that you're going to use and examples that you're going to use, and different ways to persuade them. And then, of course, ethnic, racial, and cultural groups. Maybe you want to target a specific group. For instance, you might say that your experience is, you're from an Asian culture yourself, and you want to look at Asian cultures and the way that they approach mental health. That can be an example of looking at an ethnic group. That's great, because you're narrowing your focus down. And for an example, your audience demographics could just be that specific and everything else be heterogeneous. So all age ranges, all socioeconomic statuses, all political affiliations, all religious affiliations, except everybody needs to be Asian. And you're just looking at that, and that's your audience. And so that can be specific. You might want to narrow and have one other category and narrow it down. Well, altogether, we went through the demographics, the disposition analysis, and the knowledge analysis. And those are the three areas that you want to be able to analyze your audience with. So take a moment, think about who you want to convince this Friday when we're talking about hospitalizations and the state of psychiatric wards in this country this Friday. Kind of thinking about who you want to be talking to. And as you get closer to what your point is, you can start to really think about and tailor your audience profile. Next, we're going to get into counter arguments. So go ahead and get out of this. Open the PowerPoint so you can see this at your own leisure, and then we'll get started. Thank you.